One of the things that we want to continue to emphasize, and you keep it in the back of your mind because it's the ministry God is leading you into, is a purpose for problems. You are dealing with people that have problems. And so I'll have pastors come up to me and say, well, you know, your whole life as a Christian isn't one big problem. Well, that's true. Well, unless you're from Texas.
I beg to differ.
So, but that's true. Our lives aren't one big problem, but we're meeting people at their point of problems. And at the point of problem is when you can point someone to Christ. And so we have a philosophy of problems. And it was interesting in Costa Rica this year. I was there and a friend went with me, took me in his car, and he wanted to go for a ride with his wife. And he said, I really wanted to be with you because we speak the same language. And I said, right. We speak the same language. He speaks Spanish and I speak English, and his English is pretty good. He said, no, I've been listening to you for 5 years, and I never understood what you were saying. But I wanted to tell you, I speak the same language now. I found Christ as my life, and everything changed. And he was so excited about it. And so he had all these questions that he'd thought about that he wanted to ask me. And one of them is there life on other planets? And I said, that's an interesting question. But I can tell you there isn't life on another planet. That doesn't exist. Because this reality, as you read about it in Genesis, centers on man. And even the universe is created for man, and it all ends at man, and it's all centered on this earth. And, you know, and all the amazing things we don't need to talk about. The earth crust was another inch thicker. People couldn't live on it. It couldn't support life. All of this comes down to man. But I said, in terms of God having other realities, he could have lots of realities, and we only know about one other reality, and that reality is heaven, but it's a completely different reality because heaven is a cube. But I said, here's the interesting thing. You have this reality of the earth here, and you have a reality of heaven over here, and they're two completely different realities. How can the place be a cube? We can't really even comprehend what it is because I live over here, and to take the concepts I know here of the world here and transport me over here, I don't have the words over here to describe what I saw over here. And so you read Revelations and you read Ezekiel, and it is wheels within wheels, and half the time you're reading it just going, because I don't know exactly what he's trying to say. Words fail, human words, to describe that. And you can't describe what's there. But the interesting thing is, there is a way to go from this reality to that reality. There's a little tube, and the name of it is Jesus. There's one mediator between God and man, that man, Jesus. And I looked at him, and he was telling me the problems he was having and things that were going on. And I said, do you know, brother, one of the purposes of earth is to get you ready for heaven. You have to see a purpose for this earth and for the fallen world to get you ready. And I said, here's the problem. I can't get through that tube named Jesus to get over there. And so what he's using are problems to thin me down until I'll go squirting through there. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, listen, I am just too weighted down with pride and glory and righteousness and kingdom building and strength and idols and insanity and self-centeredness and a controlling image for me to squirt through this thing named Jesus. And I said, I want you to see the earth as a place where you're trimming down, and one day you can just go squirting right through there. And you take with you what you've learned here into heaven. Keith and I were talking about this the other day. The idea, people say that when you get to heaven, your mind goes blank. You know, that you start completely over, that you have nothing. Well, what was the purpose of all this then? There is a purpose on this earth. God is working in your problems, and he's teaching you something you couldn't learn any other way. And one day I had a revelation that made my heart absolutely sing. one of the most encouraging things the Lord's ever spoken to me, that Mike, your sins and your failures and your mistakes and your stupidity, all caused by you, were permitted by me to teach you things about me you couldn't have learned without your sin and your failure and your stupid mistakes. Mm-hmm. And my heart sang at that. And so, yes, we've all had those things, but I've learned things in them that I couldn't have learned any other way. I have to see things that way because we stand right here, and you know how you can push over the dominoes and then the last one falls? And you can push them over this way, and they all fall. If I can't believe that God was in the midst of my failure and I didn't cause it, I caused it, I did it, I take responsibility for it, I sinned, Christ had to wear it, He picks up the tab, Dad always pays. In the end, Dad pays. You know, you all go out for dinner, but Dad ends up paying. I know that Jesus paid, He picked it all up. I know that in the end. But I see that my sin and my failures and my mistakes and my stupidity was all permitted by Him to create something in me that could have never happened without it. Do you agree to that? Because when I agree and I push this way, all the dominoes end at the glory of God. And I'm rejoicing. But if I push this way and it's all going to end at the glory of man, then every mistake that I've made has hindered me, and I'm less of what I could have been, and at what point do I just quit? And so if I have to sit there and say to you, and the enemy will whisper to you this all the time, think of where you'd be today if you hadn't have done this or you hadn't have done that. Well, if that's true, where does that end? And I push the dominoes this way, and you have to take it to its logical conclusion, and in the end, no one is going to get anything out of this life except to hear from God, poorly done, unfaithful servant. Christ came that you might be miserable and miserably abundantly. And that's where it ends. But I can go this way and see that it ends in the glory of God and that I have a purpose in my struggles. And it's so important to have a purpose in your struggles, isn't it? Because then I don't fight the struggle and I don't become a Buddhist. And I'm just looking for these struggles to go away. And then if I can't get them to go away, then the thing I look for is my exit where I get out of here. It's interesting, you were asking this the other day. Is there going to be choice in heaven? Will there be? Because if you listen to what people are saying, they're actually hoping there's no choice in heaven. Because one of the reasons they want to go to heaven is that they've had to struggle in their choices, and if we can get to heaven, we don't have to make a choice. But it's not true. You're going to have heaps of choices in heaven. And you're being prepared for choices here. And the glory of God is that you chose Him. The glory of God will be in choice. Jesus didn't come to make you choose. He came so you could choose. It's not the will of God that everyone choose Jesus. It's the will of God that everyone choose. And so when the unbeliever is chosen against God, you look them straight in the face and you say, you're in the perfect will of God now. Because you chose. It was your choice. And it's the thing that He can't take away from me because it has to do with my heart. It has to do with being made in His image. And He's using this world and doing everything He can without interfering with choice to make me choose. So He's in the midst of these problems, and one of these problems that we have has to do with idolatry. So we look at idolatry, and we started out, and we were using the example of Rachel and Leah, 20 years with Jehovah, 20 years blessed by Jehovah, 20 years given everything. Could you think of a more blessed life than the life that they had? And yet, when they leave, the one thing they want to take with them are the household idols, the things that they grew up trusting, just in case God doesn't come through. They're not any different than Israel when they were in Egypt. And they got out by looking up to God, and in 11 days, all of a sudden, they're looking to themselves, and they get to spend their 40 years in a circle until you get rid of your idols and you stop trusting the idols. And as Keith brought out the other day, these young guys started to get a new history that these idols don't take you anywhere, but it's trusting God that gets you somewhere. So we have our idols, and God has us going in a circle until we're ready to get rid of them. So you came to me and you were talking about your problem. But here's the real problem. You're trusting something other than Him. God works in order. If I take your cell phone number and I get all the numbers, and I take this number and put it at the back, I'll never be able to call you, even though I have all the right numbers. You have an order that you want God to work in, but it's not His order. He's always moving along in the order of love and the thing that's really making you unhappy, and that's where He's working. And so I know this about everyone in this room. You're going to end well. There's no question about it. You're on this highway of life, and I know that you're going to end well. But as you move along in this highway, you're going to hit dips. The dip isn't there to keep you from ending well. The dip is there at this moment, and God's revealing it in the fullness of time in your life, because if you don't deal with it now, it's going to become a chasm later that makes you miserable. And so He's always dealing in the areas where you need to be dealt with in this moment in time. And He wants to get rid of this so you can remain joyful and not end up in the chasm over the thing. He has an order that He works. And in this order, one of the primary things is to get rid of idols. So we have those idols. We bring them into our lives with us. There's another way to look at idols. And because God works in patterns. And so we said, here's the Old Testament temple. And it's has three parts: the Holy of Holies, where God dwells, the holy place, where the priests work, and the outer court, where it's expressed. In the same way, we said that you have a spirit and a soul and a body. But there's a veil that keeps the spirit, the life of the spirit, from flowing through the body and the soul in power. Christ has already conquered all things. Christ is in you. There's no difference between you and me, Billy Graham or anybody else, or the Apostle Paul. You have Christ in you. The problem is when we have the veil there and His life doesn't flow through me. And of course part of this is that we don't even know that He's in me, but when He doesn't flow through me, then I'm left trying to live the Christian life in the power of the soul and the body. And who is it that's going to live exactly like Jesus? So you live in a constant state of condemnation and guilt. What does this veil look like? Well, that veil is your old life, your self-life. We're saying take up the cross and deny yourself. And so far we've looked at the things that make up self-centeredness and insanity and a controlling identity. Idols make up part of the old man or the self-life. And so I want to look at those and how these idols were developed in you, which is part of your self-life. Now I'm asking you again, you don't need to take a lot of notes. Sit and listen, look at the diagram, and tell me what it says to you. Because what it says to you is most important. As we look at this veil of idols, here's how I see them being made up. We look to other people in our self-centered, insane condition to meet our needs. They're self-centered and insane. And so what happens is we end up with hurts in our lives. And so we begin to look back through our lives and look through your life, and what were the hurts, what were significant things. They're the kind of things that you drive along in the car and they pop into your mind. And you remember it for some reason. And it may be a big thing that somebody died close to you, and it can be a little thing that the kids made fun of you at school. But you did have a hurt. And so I'll take the hurt that a boy grows up with an alcoholic father and he listens to mom and dad fight every day. If you're 8, 9, 10 years old, does that create a lot of trauma? Now, if you're a doer, you might be in there in the fight. But a thinker's going to be withdrawing and hiding. They've got to find a way to cope with all of that tension. They hate the unknown. They like emotional stability. So the way this boy copes is he hides underneath the bed. And his coping mechanism becomes hiding. Whenever there's a fight, he's a hide. He withdraws with it. He goes away from it, so he's going to withdraw. Now, things begin to escalate, and Dad is actually beating the mother. So he has to watch his mother get beat. Does that bother a kid? So now by age 12, things have escalated, 12, 13, and he hides underneath his parents' bed. And as he crawls under the bed, he's laying there hiding, and he finds that that's where Dad leaves his porno. Now, what would you rather do? Look at porno or go watch your mom be beat? So I'm not blaming anybody for the idols they develop. And so he's looking at the porno, and he doesn't hear any of the noise and any of the fighting that's going on. The world would say he's coping by withdrawing and hiding and watching porno. But the Bible would say that he's fallen into an idol, because an idol is anything I trust in, cling to, and rely on under stress and pressure other than God. Jonah 2:8, those that cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could have been theirs. So he's holding on to this idol. Now, he becomes a Christian at 16, goes to Bible college, seminary. At age 40, he's a pastor. The church is threatening to fire him. He's got incredible pressure with the staff. He's fighting with his wife, and his teenage daughter's rebelling. If you were Satan and your job were to kill, steal, and destroy, what would you tempt him in? Yeah, why?
They gave him comfort.
Yeah, it's still registered. He brought it in the bag with him. He came into the Christian life with it in there, hid back here. He could say he didn't bring it, but I know he did bring it because he's now into it. And Satan isn't stupid. He's not going to tempt him to stab himself in the leg to get his mind off the pain. He's not going to do that. He's going to tell him to do something that worked in the past. He has a history with this idol. Now, some idols become so personalized they become an addiction. And all an addiction is, in its very simple form, is an idol that's become a person. It actually calls to you. Come and meet with me. I'll take away your pain. You develop a relationship with it. You start dating it. And that's what an addiction is at its the very base level. So he hides and he watches porno. Here's the problem. God knew you were going to be born without him. He knew you'd find a way to cope until you found him. He knew all of that had happened in this room, of going between being good and being perfect, between giving up on Adam life and accepting Christ's life. So your coping mechanism worked to a measure. Now that you're a believer and you have Christ in you, how well does the coping mechanism work? So I'm going to take a break now, and I've had your family send to Mount Alfred the clothes you wore when you were 5. I'm going to have you go put them on, and we'll come back and finish the day up with those clothes on. Now, how happy are you going to be? How comfortable? It'll be tight. It won't be comfortable. You'll be very uncomfortable wearing clothes that don't fit you anymore. Once Christ has come into you, if you want to believe it or not, He's in you, and there's been a change at the very core of your being, and the things you used to wear, you cannot wear. And you'll suffocate in them. And you would hate wearing those. And then we're going to go to Boona in those. You're not going to like any of this. And so what we'll begin to see, because that doesn't fit anymore, and idols don't fit anymore, is you begin to see the symptoms of someone who trusts something other than God. And you'll see in them worry, doubt, fear, anxiety, and internalized anger, which will take the form of depression. Now here's the thing, we're not very bright. So we try the idol. It doesn't help me like it used to. Because when you were 5, you could wear the 5-year-old clothes and they fit. So they did help cover your nakedness. But now when I'm 50, I can't put on those clothes and expect it to cover any nakedness. It doesn't cover any nakedness. It doesn't work that way. And so now I'm going to get frustrated and angry and have this internal temper tantrum because these things don't fit anymore and they don't work. And now the enemy will whisper to me, well, it did cover you in the past. Maybe you just need to try a different set of 5-year-old clothes. So you try the other set of 5-year-old clothes and it doesn't work. And then the next set and the next set. It doesn't matter. Anything in that closet or box isn't going to fit you. And so you're going to end up with all of these symptoms. Now, isn't it amazing that you came into the lectures believing it was your mate that made you depressed and worried and full of fear and anxiety and frustration and all of those kind of things. But it really wasn't, because what we're saying it is it is idolatry that causes that. We've gone to a root issue. I want you to see what the root issue is. In the same, you have a variety of hurts that you've had in your own life, all of these hurts. Idols are very deceiving because they can be good, good, or good, bad, or the bad, bad, but it's still an idol. And all I would say at this point is there's grade A idols, and what are your grade A idols? And grade A idols can be ministry and titles and image and all of that kind of thing. And then you can have the grade B idols, are things you run to. And we want to make this clear too, they're not always idols, are they? I mean, they're not always idols. It might be an idol for you and not an idol for me. So I might listen to music on the odd day, but I'm not listening to music on the odd day, and particular music that'll put me into a funk and depression and make me feel bad about myself. But that may be what you're doing. So it can be music, and it can be videos, and it can be shopping, and it can be obsession, all those kind of things. It can be your idol, but it may not be my idol. And then, of course, all of our attention's given to the ugly idols. Drugs, sex, alcohol, all those kind of things that are given to the senses that allow you to cope. But it's just a way of coping. When you see people in these things with these symptoms, you know that there's an idol involved in the whole thing. What we're saying is, part of what makes up this veil, the old life, the Adam life, is your idolatry. And I want you to understand what your idols are. And these idols, you'll have hurts. You had to find a way to cope. Your coping mechanism became your idol. You trusted it in your youth, and now it won't meet the need of today. And as you're trying to do it and do more of it, you're starting to develop symptoms. Worry, doubt, fear, anxiety, and depression. Now, worry, doubt, fear, and anxiety and depression is not the problem, and it's not the problem that you had hurts, because we've all had hurts. The problem is that you've gone back to your idols again. Okay, tell me write a couple of sentences on that. Ann, what do you got there?
In order to cope with life, I either trust Jesus or idols from my past that used to bring me comfort. The problem is my old idols don't cover my sin anymore and make me feel better. They only bring more guilt.
Okay. Now, it's things attach themselves all the time to you, and they'll attach themselves to a teaching. One of the things we do every year is a get-together in our ministry, and we look at things to cut off, not to add. Because things have been added all year long. You know, they're just added all the time. Your teaching will be added to all the time naturally. You don't have to worry about that. As you deal with people, as you do it. And what's fun about this ministry is as you're lecturing or counseling, you'll be taking notes like mad because it's the first time you've heard it.
Yeah.
Because the Holy Spirit is really giving you words, and He's personalizing it for that person, and they're telling you their situation, and all of a sudden you're seeing that and you're writing it down like mad because it's the first time you've heard it. So things will add naturally to it. That's why I only want you again to get the 10%, the core. And if you have that thought right there, just the one you gave me, Amy, you can add to that. I mean, it'll add as you're talking to the person. And you just say, okay, where does your stuff fit into here? Where does your life fit into what we're saying? And you can come up with your own examples and be able to do that. The other thing we're looking at then that just ties into that, and it kind of ends just the idea that you have idols, is that we talked about having problems. And that the problems were at the branches of the tree, and you have root rot. Well, what people will do with an idol is this is the cave of your idols, and when the pressure's on, you haven't met the situation head on, you've run back into the cave and coped with your idol. And you'll be stuck as long as you're doing that. And God is using the situation you're in to make you give up on your idols. So we talked again about these are all problems. I know that you have problems. There's a root rot here. We've been talking about that. But idols are making you avoid everything, the problems and the root rot. Yes, you're avoiding all of life because you go back here in your little cave and don't let go. Because some people let go back there and they just become one with their idol. And that's how they've decided to cope the rest of their life. And they have no intentions of changing. It's like I said to the fellow struggling with homosexuality. If I could snap my fingers and take it out of your hand, would you let me? And he said, of course, of course. And I said, yeah, but what do you do under pressure? And what do you do under stress? And what do you do when you're rejected? And what do you do when you have a fight with your friends? What do you do? And he goes, well, I run to that. And I said, are you sure you want me to take it away? Because what would you do? And of course, we're going to be talking about what you do. We're going to give you something else, the proper concept of God, and try Him out. But see, most people are coming to you with a problem saying, please take it away if you can get it out of my dead cold hand. Because I don't have another way to cope. And it's not good enough to take something away from a person without giving them something better, but we're going to do that. But please be honest, do you really want to be free from that? And we go back to what we said the first day. God has to give you the desire of your heart, because being able to have a heart desire is what puts you in the image of God. Are you really getting what you want? Because you're hanging on to this thing.